All right, here we go. I will present my screen. So we have a number of different negotiation classes available to you guys. Tammy Gardner provides a really fantastic training session on negotiating commissions and the listing presentation. So we have a number of specific training courses, and if you guys need any help finding any of those, let me know. But today I want to talk about basic strategies for negotiations. And I really want to go through examples. If any of you want to chime in and share some examples, I certainly encourage you to do so. But just kind of setting the standards for a reminder that our license says real estate salesperson. And if that makes you squirm and you say, Erin, I'm not a salesy person, I just got into real estate to help people, that doesn't mean that that isn't what your driving force is. I'm not talking used car sales strategies. I'm talking using all of the tools we have available, using certain conversation strategies to do the best to represent our clients and help them achieve their goal of home ownership, of renting, of selling, whatever it is that we're trying to coach them through. So I'm going to talk through a number of different scenarios here. Can you guys see my screen okay? Get a thumbs up? Okay, awesome. Thanks, team. All right, a few things to remember. You are a sales agent, not an email pusher. So I can't tell you how often I've been on the listing side, and it drives me nuts that all I get from a buyer's agent is attached, find the offer. What on earth does that do for us representing our client? So each conversation you have or email you write during negotiations should offer direction to the other party. When communicating with your clients, don't simply ask, how would you like to proceed? Provide options. An example would be, I've seen some agents in the past that have forwarded over the inspection report and the amendment and said, how would you like to respond? That's really vague, and our position in this transaction should be to coach individuals. So though we have to be careful from a liability standpoint, we don't ever want to say that high water pressure isn't a big idea or big deal and drive specific directions with respect to that. We do want to give them their options so they understand what those may be. In that example I'm describing, they had the option to agree to these requested repairs. They have the opportunity to agree to some of them and respond that they won't agree to others. They have the offer or the opportunity to offer cash in lieu of, at closing, in lieu of repairs. So give your folks ideas on what their different options are in responding rather than just asking them how they'd like to respond. And we'll talk through some other different examples here. I personally don't feel an offer should ever be sent to a listing agent with only an email that states what I just said. Please find my buyer's offer attached. Set the tone. Start developing a relationship from day one. Examples, make sure to humanize your client. Don't just tell them, don't just say my buyer, make them people. Johnny and Amy, John, whatever it is, humanize your client and tell their personal story. So I still love, and I know there's questions out there about it, I still love the personal letter from a buyer to the sellers specifically, but above that, I'm still going to make sure that in this sea of offers that a listing agent is receiving, that they see my snippet on why they should be accepting our offer. Give context to the details of the offer. You never know if you are working with a newer agent on the other side of the transaction, maybe somebody who hasn't sold in a while, or somebody that's not familiar with a VA loan. You always want to make sure that if you've written in something or details of an offer that you think are going to be appealing, don't just include it in the offer and assume the other agent is going to understand that. Sell those points. Point out that you guys feel confident this is the home for your clients, so we're only asking for a 5-day option period, or we're completely waiving the appraisal requirement. So point out those details in that email. Provide a CMA if necessary. Respect the listing agent and the seller when doing so. If you have buyers that are they won't go higher than a certain price point. I know this is a bit of a crazy market and most offers are going over, but provide some context as to why your buyers have decided to make that offer. And then remember, anytime you're sending an email to the other agent, keep in mind, often agents forward those emails directly to their clients. So when you're speaking to an agent, make sure you're thinking about how this email would be read from the sellers, the buyers, the person on the other side of that transaction, because quite often that agent's going to forward it all over. So often when I'm writing these emails, I'm speaking through that agent and thinking about how that other party is going to perceive the details that I'm including there. And I'll pause there. Any thoughts, questions, examples you guys want to add? Please feel free to unmute, use your chat window.
Hey, Erin, this is Jackie. I have
Hi,
a
Jackie.
question. I
Sure.
went offline for a couple minutes, so I might have missed this part of it. But my question is, how do you humanize the client and avoid um, violating fair housing laws in this market, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
in years past, we just put it all out there, right? Named the family, the everybody, but that's become more forefront now, and so we have to be aware of that.
Absolutely. So think about always making factual statements. I even include photos. None of that can be perceived. I will say a seller's agent has to be, if I'm on the buy side, I'm just telling a story of my family. And all the articles I'm reading, that doesn't open us up for that liability because we're telling our personal story, which we're not asking them to select us because of any one specific trait. So as long as you're making factual statements, my family, they've served in the service, so I have young kids that attended this school and they really need to be in the school district. Focus on those factual statements about your folks with the warm and fuzzy about why this area is personally important to them. I would say I'm far more concerned about being careful with fair housing when it comes to my responses to any of those stories if I'm on the selling side, because obviously when it comes to reading a family's personal story, we need to make sure that our sellers making these decisions based off of facts and not a personal preference in any way, shape, or form. So that's where we need to be really careful. So from the sell side, we can say that a family's personal letter really appealed to them, but I'd leave it at that. How does that make you feel, Jackie?
Yeah, I get it. I understand that. I think it's a fine line, but it's one that you know. I think it's better than just saying, "Here's my client's offer." So
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, I mean, I've had agents that say, well, we don't have this crazy story and we're just normal, boring people. You know, the buyers sometimes even say that we're all normal, boring people, and they don't have that huge story. But at least calling your clients, not making them my buyers, calling them by name, mentioning their kids, those little things that just remind the other party that there are humans on the other side of that piece of paper, that contract, that alone will have a huge impact. You know, when I call my clients and I say, okay, we have 3 offers, the Jane Doe, the Smiths, and the Johnsons, whatever that may be. And it helps to humanize that, and even reminds my sellers when stresses can get high in negotiations that there are people on the other side of that transaction. Great point, Jackie.
Erin, I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm glad you're on this subject because yesterday we lost an offer to 22. Well, the listing agent said there were 22 offers. And in my head, I was wondering, like, how does she present all those? You know, because I did what you said. You know, I highlighted the strong points of my offer, and then I also wrote just a little, like, you know, personal story about how much my clients appreciated the home and so forth and so forth. But I was always wondering, like, how are these listing agents presenting all these offers at once, and are they actually telling our story?
Absolutely. So let's circle back to that just so we can get through some of those strategies. And at the end of this presentation, I actually have information on multiple offer situations so we can chat through that. Great question. And very pertinent today, right? All right, all parties are human. Make sure you humanize your clients and those you're negotiating with. And this is on both sides of the transactions. I quite often have to go back and remind my clients, and especially in the inspections portion, where sellers might take it personally that they ask for so many repairs because they take really great care of their home. Make sure that you're reminding your clients throughout the buying and selling process that this is stressful for both sides. You know, quite often buyers are anxious that the sellers haven't moved out in time, and they forget that they're trying to get kids out of school and pack boxes and change jobs. So those are subtle reminders, tactful. You know, we're not throwing that in our client's face. We don't want them to feel like we're not on their side. But as often as we can, reminding them that these aren't sides, that we all have the same goal. Our sellers want to sell that home and our buyers want to purchase it. We all have that same goal of getting to the closing table is really important. Don't ever make the other parties of a transaction the enemy. I know it can be really tempting. You guys call the listing agent 6 times and that listing agent doesn't return your call. And it's easy to go right to your clients and say, I just can't get her to return my call. This is so frustrating. Be careful with that, because if we make somebody an enemy at the beginning of the transaction, A, we don't know what they're going through. Maybe that agent's going through something personally at that time. But if we make them an enemy early on, it can be really hard to continue that relationship and not let our clients get frustrated with that later on down the road. So I can tell you, living it personally, how often I've been frustrated and said, I can't believe this person isn't doing this. But I never say it to my clients. I always say, you know, I'm going to let them know I've reached out a number of times. I'm not sure what the other agent has going on today, if it's her day off, whatever it may be, but I'm going to continue to follow up so that we can get an answer. So be very careful about how you approach that. Exercise strategic silence. I have taken the Harvard Business Review class on negotiations. I remember negotiations in my business classes in school, so many different strategies, and almost every time I'm talking to somebody I really respect from a negotiation standpoint, they say strategic silence is their favorite strategy for success. So it is a challenge to perfect, but seriously, just stop talking and listen. It takes a confident person to calmly sit in silence, and I've got this all written out, in the face of a tough negotiation. Even if you don't feel particularly confident, the more you can choose to sit back and listen, the more information you will gain and the better your negotiations will go. For people who are not comfortable with silence, you offering silence will make them uncomfortable and they will start sharing details. So the more you can practice that. If you're having a conversation, I'm on the phone with Martha. Martha, you're top on my screen. And I say, Martha, why are your sellers selling the home? And I feel like there's something that's happened that I don't know what's going on, a flip, something of this sort. Martha, why are your folks selling this home? And she might respond, well, they're just thinking about relocating. They need a little bit more space. Oh, what kind of space are they looking for? If I ask just slightly leading questions to get to more details and then sit back and wait, most people won't sit in silence on the phone, so it can really help you get additional information. So think about silence and don't let it happen to you. If somebody asks you a question that you know is going to something personal you don't want to share, something of that sort for your clients, or the folks, I have an agent who was just dealing with that agent on the other side. Well, your clients take 800, and then she sits and waits. They're listed for 950 and she keeps those prying questions. The answer can be no. Be comfortable with your concise answer and then move on from that. So strategic silence, you can Google all kinds of amazing videos on practicing strategic silence in negotiations. But remember, you don't have to be the one to fill in those empty spaces. I recommend when you're negotiating to make sure that you're always finding a ground point. I'll pause here. I see some chat window threads popping up. Nelly, yeah, good luck with that one. Okay. Exercise negotiating from market value. So right now, obviously, this is a unique market where we're seeing market value, and so often buyers are offering above that, right? But I do encourage you, rather than setting list price as your ground point with your clients, consider what you believe that the home should sell for in today's market, or what the comparables dictate, instead of setting the listing price. So an example for buyers, the homeowner feels their home is worth X. The market says it's worth Y. What is this home worth to you? So be careful not to say, you know, let's say the home is listed for 400, you run the comps and it's not a penny over 375. If you say this home is worth 375, you've locked your buyers into, I'm overpaying for this home. So we have to be careful about setting an anchor at a point that we can't move in the future, because it's all about what that home is worth to that buyer. So we can talk about the market, what the comparables are showing, but be careful about setting an anchor that you can't get your clients to move in the future. For sellers, we have to be careful about this. You're going to go into a listing presentation and you're going to tell the sellers that you believe fair market value for their home is $400,000, but they ask you to stretch it to $425,000. When I'm negotiating or helping them look at offers, I'm going to go back and reference, well, remember the comparables showed us market value was at 400, but we listed at 425 and the offers came in at 430. So it's giving them that win of, oh, I'm already 30,000 over that anchor point versus dealing with that listing price. Does that make sense? Think about those anchors that you're setting for your folks when you're having conversations with them, because it is hard to change an anchor once you've set a magic number in somebody's head. And it might be, it also happens even in our crazy market that we felt the home should be listed at 400,000. They talked us into 415 and we get an offer for 405, which is a really great offer. If we use that listing price, that 415 as our anchor, they feel like they're losing. Versus if I go back and say, okay, remember when we met, we said the market dictated the comparables were at 400. We listed at 415, but we're getting 405, 5 over what we thought the market showed. Make sense? Think about those anchors as you're going through. Remember to establish your client's priorities. So often when I'm coaching agents through processes of negotiations, whether it's the listing agreement, when your buyers are deciding what to offer, so often I hear, what should I do? Well, we don't make those decisions. So remember, it's all about what your buyers, your sellers are trying to accomplish. And you should know their motivations. So I know quite often it feels personal to ask very concrete questions of your clients, but I certainly encourage it. So with your buyers, is your family looking for the home of their dreams, or is this an investor looking to maximize his return on his investment? Knowing your buyer's motivation up front helps you establish priorities. Are they a military member that might have to be able to sell in 3 years? All of these things are going to dictate the guidance we give them when they're submitting an offer and when they're negotiating. Is this their dream home? How would they feel if they lost it? Oh, we'd be fine. We'd find another one that's a better deal. Obviously, then I know where I need to stand from a negotiation strategy. If they're trying to get the best deal, I'm okay saying, okay, I'm going to go in a little bit lower. We're going to hold our ground because I know they're not going to be devastated if they lose that home. So I need to know my client's motivation so I know how we're going to respond in the language I'm going to use. With a seller's motivation, what's their goal in selling the home? What's most important to them? Do they need to minimize inconvenience? Are they taking 3 kids out of the house, a dog? Is it impossible to handle those showings? Or do they need to maximize their return? And where I'm asking those questions, everybody wants to get the most for their home, but when I ask that question, I ask them to choose one of those 2 things. What's more important to them? I know when I'm negotiating on their behalf, if somebody comes in a little bit lower, but it's a really clean offer, I don't have to worry about appraisals. I know we really need to focus on that so I can describe how that's going to make this an easier and smoother process for them. Or if they say, no, it's all about the money, we need as much money as possible for this next move, then I'm going to describe how we might be able to negotiate that strategy. So ask those very specific questions so you understand your client's priorities. Establish limits, and this goes in with your priorities, your clients under their priorities. Discuss limits directly. You might say, with these negotiations, in order to best represent you, I need to know your worst case scenario and your best case scenario. And I have that conversation with every seller I represent. What's our worst case scenario? What's our best case scenario? Well, Erin, we just can't sell this home if it's for less than X. Or our greatest fear is 3 days before closing, they back out. Find out what their worst case scenarios are and their best case scenarios. For buyers, what's the home worth to you? How would you feel if you lost this home? They put up a lot of pressure on you guys, right? Erin, what should we offer? it's a huge question. So what you're just dealing with, it's a lot of pressure. There's no way for us to give really good guidance on just how far they should stretch that offer if we don't know how they're feeling about this home and how they'd feel if they lost it. Sometimes I make these simpler terms. You know, hey, Marissa, should we offer $5,000 more? Well, are you willing to lose this home over $5,000? $5,000 is normally right now, today's interest rates, $1,000 equals $7 for a monthly payment. So 5 times 7, you know, that's how much they're paying extra per month. Are you willing to lose that over $35,000 or $35 per month? Or is it worth it to you to commit to that extra per month at a better chance of getting this house? If losing their home is the greatest fear, treat this scenario, every scenario, as if it's a multiple offer situation and do our best to win. For sellers, what's the ideal sales price? What's the lowest price for which you can afford to sell the home? How long can you afford to keep paying this mortgage? These feel like direct questions, but asking these questions in different scenarios, again, allow me to understand the motivation, so I'm not surprised in the future by those. I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions. This is not the time to exercise silence, Nellie. Anybody have any questions or strategies you've used that have been helpful? Any questions you ask every seller to get a feel for?
I have a question.
Yes, Laura.
Can we use that scenario, $7 for every 1,000?
I normally will go to my mortgage calculator, but it's between $5 and $7 for most mortgage situations right now. So I use that as a benchmark, and I always be careful to say it's about, but yes, I estimate on the high end $7 for every 1,000 extra they're offering. You're welcome.
So Erin, that's a 30-year mortgage you're talking about?
That's a 30-year mortgage on an FHA actually today.
Okay, so if it was going to be 15, can you double it, or does it not work that way?
No, it doesn't work that way. I'd bust out my title app and do a quick estimate at the 2 different prices.
Okay.
I would only augment your comment by saying, well, at 3.5% interest, it'll be $6 a month extra.
There you go. Perfect. I like that, Jim.
And the way to find that number is, if you use the title calculator, is just put in the price, write the number down, put in the price plus 5,000, and write that number down, subtract.
Absolutely. I do exactly that. And I can't tell you how often I've done that on my calculator and then send that screenshot right to my clients, so they'll see those numbers side by side.
Yeah, because it's not a linear relationship.
Yeah, completely agree. Great share, Jim. All right, learn what the other party needs. If you can get in contact with the listing agent, don't hold up your offer. But if you can get in contact with the listing agent, never submit an offer without asking what the seller wants to see in that offer. I tell you guys this constantly. The first conversation I have with the listing agent when I call to let them know we're going to be submitting an offer is, are there any terms that your seller would see most favorable in this offer? If I can find out what they want a temporary lease back, they want a long closing, a short closing, something unique, the more I can find out up front, the more boxes that my offer already checks for them up front without having to think about negotiating. So the easier I make it for them, the better. And I got examples in here for you. Is a quick close more important to maximize their return, or they're still looking for their next home? Ask those questions up front. And in this crazy busy market, if I can't get an answer on the phone, I can't make that phone call connection, I shoot a quick text. Drawing up an offer on 123 Main Street, any terms your seller would find most appealing. You'll be surprised how much information you get. And if you get somebody on the phone, ask the questions. If they say, I don't know, exercise strategic silence and wait. And I bet they will come up with an answer for you on some of those things that they realize might be most appealing. Pick up the phone and call. I know it's not always an option, or you don't always catch somebody on the line, but I pick up the phone and call every time. Live conversation is essential to effective negotiating. There's a natural back and forth in a conversation that allows for more information to be passed and understanding to be found, and allows you to determine win-win scenarios. It's happened to each of us. You've sent an email or a text. The party on the other side completely misreads it, and it was not at all what you were trying to articulate. Or the other way. I sent you a text. I was short because I was training when I did it, and you thought I was mad at you. You know, whatever it may be, it happens. So the more you can pick up the phone and call, the better. Examples, you might learn that a seller is very nervous because they're buying a home and trying to close both sales, move the same day. Those conversations open up those opportunities to learn more about your sellers and how you can work effectively with the other side of the transaction. If you're in a multiple offer situation, your client now has a card to play with a lease back, those types of things. So pick up the phone and call anytime that you can. I will say I should follow up with that and say, throughout the entire process of a contract, pick up the phone and call at every step. If I'm negotiating inspections, I don't just send over the repair request. I pick up the phone, I call the agent, I attempt to talk through what we're going to be negotiating, and then I send a follow-up email reiterating what I described with the associated documents. That way I've set the tone and it doesn't feel like an email attack. It feels like, hey, we discussed this. This is exactly what we're looking for, and it sets the tone for success.
Hey, Erin.
Yes, Chris.
Quick question on that, just because you brought up the phrase a win-win scenario, which I think is something I love going for. What if you find yourself on the other end, on the other side of the table from an agent who works in that win-lose scenario, or you're the client who kind of has that win-lose approach?
Great question. And we'll talk, I think, on a future slide about language that I try to use. But even when I'm dealing with a win-lose, every time I literally use those leading phrases. Okay, we want this to be a win-win. This is what we're offering to your party, or this is what we're concessing, whatever it may be, and this is what we're asking for in return. So I just kill them with kindness, Chris. Normally, they soften up. Yes, there are brokerages that teach negotiation through intimidation. That is a class that's offered in our market, which is just hilarious to me. But I can tell you that just never gets to the point where it's going to work for all parties. So I continue to just be positive sunshine and win-win and humanizing. If I can humanize my folks or give some context, and I think I'll reference that on some slides, so I want to kind of chat through that a little bit more too, Chris. If I can humanize my folks and give context to why we're asking for what we're asking for, it can normally help with some of that battle. We'll talk through some examples. You're welcome. Don't let me forget to come back to that. Asking leading questions, rephrase questions that give a negative connotation. So just be really careful with your language. When representing a buyer or getting a listing, don't ask, why is the seller selling? I just shared that example that she was asking that question, why is the seller selling? Instead, pose a leading question to find out why they're selling. If you notice from tax records that they've owned the property for 15 years, ask the listing agent if the seller's raised their children there. What is their commute to work like? Ask personal questions that will give context to why they might be relocating. Because we've all been at the receiving end of, why is the seller selling? It sounds like something's wrong, or that we're asking something posing. Was this a personal home or investment property? There are a lot of questions that we can ask that give us context to get the answer that we're looking for. If you guys have examples, please share those. This also gives the opportunity to tell the agent about your buyer story a little bit. So I might ask, if I see the sellers are in a 38,000 or 3,800 square foot home and they've lived there for 15 years, I might ask if they raised their family there, and then I can share the story that our clients really are interested in this home because their kids go to school in this area, they've really loved it, and it again helps with humanizing and setting that tone. Chris, I like asking what's bringing about the change for your clients. Absolutely. And some people like to say, have your clients decided where they're going, where they're relocating? And then the agent will say, oh yeah, they found this fabulous place, and it kind of answers some of those questions. Absolutely. So consider leading questions, and when you're calling to ask questions of a listing agent, of the buyer's agent, the person on the other side of the transaction, make sure you ask yourself first how that's going to be perceived on the other end. Set that tone. Talked about this win-win. I can't tell you how often I've worked with agents on the other side of the transaction that care more about saving their clients that $50 then the communications of how we're going to successfully all get to closing at the end. So I know I don't really need to say this to our team, but your job is to help people buy and sell homes, not always get the best deal for their transaction. So it is not always about that saving them the $50 or those details. It is about making this a smooth transaction and helping all parties get there. So obviously our fiduciary duty is to help our buyers or sellers achieve what they're trying to achieve. But I can't tell you how often I hear agents say, well, they're overpaying for it. I'm not going to let my clients overpay for it. Careful with that, because if your buyers are willing to pay that $300,000 for that home, it's worth it to them. And as long as you've given them market data and they understand that decision, that is not our decision to make for them. We provide them market data, and then if their goal is to purchase that home, it's our responsibility to make that as smooth and seamless for them as possible. So we're not going into battle. Our job is not to win the negotiation. Our job is to help our clients purchase or sell this home and meet those goals that we set with them that they described to us earlier in the transaction. Not only will going into battle annoy the other agent, making it much more difficult to negotiate, but it can actually hurt your client's interests as well. Instead, learn how to take issues and focus on solutions. So every time, Chris, that example where those agents that just want to fight over everything and they call, well, my sellers won't take a penny over this, and I'm going to ask them, what is it that's important? Is the payoff amount important to them? If the payoff amount is important to them and we're focusing on sales price, let me describe to you that for my buyers, the closing date is really important. So maybe we can find a way to make this a win-win for each of us. So find that detail that's important, and if it's that sales price that's important to them, make that a fixed point and move and negotiate around some other points for your clients. And I will go back and say win-win until my head is purple, Chris. I've pulled some snippets, some of my favorite coaches for negotiations that I've pulled these from. Language. How important is language and the words that we choose? So openly and state your intentions. These are some of my favorite sentences, phrases I use in emails, words I use on the phone. Insert phrases like win-win into your vocabulary. State your desire to achieve mutual benefit. We all want the same thing, Chris. We all want to get to the closing table. I know your sellers were really excited to receive this offer, and my buyers can't wait to purchase this home. Let's figure out the terms that work for everybody. State your desire for a long-term relationship. When you have that agent that gets a little spun up, go back and say, hey, we're all in this together. I know this has been a tough one, but the next deal we do together is going to be an easy one. Let's pick an easy one the next time. So remind them, again, we're all human. We're all in this together, and this is a long-term picture. It's not just about this one deal and where we are at this time. Show proof of your honesty and willingness to serve. Be frank, be open. I know that can be challenging sometimes in a transaction. And then examples, I was able to convince my sellers to agree to the refrigerator. However, they won't budge on the washer dryer. Think you can work your magic on your buyers and we can make this a win-win? We're working together on this. So remember, the more you can pep up the other agent on the other side and say, okay, I did this. Now maybe if you can make this happen, it'll work for all of us. So that language we choose is really important. Let's see, let me pause here and take a peek. In a scenario when you discover seller's issue, is it proper to offer to connect them to knock? Samantha, will you give me some context to your question? In a seller, when you discover a seller's issue, is it proper to offer to connect them to knock?
So let's say that you find out that the seller is anxious to buy a house, but they're contingent upon selling that one. Can you let that representative know that, you know, you are NOC certified and you can help them or refer them to?
Absolutely.
Someone who
That's problem solving. I absolutely love that. And I don't know if you mean that you're on the seller's side. If you're on the seller's side, I'll absolutely use all your tools. But sometimes we're on the other side of a transaction and we learn where there's a stressor. And that might be what you're mentioning, Samantha. I think that's a fabulous idea. Sometimes we're helping the agent on the other side of the transaction come up with solutions that'll benefit all of us equally. So that was a great share. Thank you. 100%. We just have to be careful with how we offer that information, right? So that they feel helpful and not like we are teaching them to do real estate, right? That's a hard balance, especially because JB Goodwin realtors know more than anybody else, right? Collaborative negotiations. Bill, what was that, Bill?
Absolutely.
Good, I like that. Thank you. All right, so collaborative negotiations, and you can deep dive into this if it's something you want to research further, but in typical negotiation, our best practice is for both sides to focus on how to maximize potential gain. So again, that win-win scenario. But in times of crisis, it's often the goal to minimize potential losses, where we shift our mindset shifts where it's, well, we already gave this and we already gave this. The standard tactics aren't as helpful under these circumstances, and the stress of a crisis can lead us to adopt a more skeptical or adversarial mindset towards the people we're negotiating with. To negotiate well under pressure, you should move toward a more collaborative mindset. So bringing our clients back, which can be challenging constantly, is a goal here. Help others do the same. This means being transparent and open with everyone involved and emphasizing that you share a common purpose. So we talked about this throughout this, but collaborative negotiating can be useful under normal circumstances, but it's critical to adopt when stresses get high. So pause. You're in the end of repairs, option period ends in 10 hours, and we can't decide. Your sellers are frustrated because they already gave up the refrigerator. They don't want to do that roof or those silly wood repairs around the woodwork because they don't agree that it's going to come up on the appraisal. Again, we need to pause, remind everybody that they're human, and maybe give some context. Collaborative negotiations would be, I pick up the other agent and I call and say, hey, Johnny or Chris, I'll use you since you were my example earlier. Chris, my sellers, I'll tell you from the beginning, they really didn't want to give up the refrigerator, but that was something they were really excited about how passionate the buyers were about this house, so they decided to give up the refrigerator. But now I'm having a really tough time. They're frustrated and they feel like this home that they cared so much for, that the buyers are starting to pull apart pieces and they're taking it personally. So I want to look at this list and see if we can reevaluate, and I can give some context to why the sellers feel like these aren't things that they maybe should be doing. Making it all human, bringing back to adopt that I'm being honest, I'm being frank, I'm sharing some insight into you and why we're feeling this way, and then seeing how we can get back to a win-win situation. Reciprocity. These are all right out of negotiation handbooks. These are different strategies to use. And sometimes when I'm working with an agent and I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, I come back to my little overview and say, okay, what scenario am I in? And let me pick some language to figure out how I might be able to approach this from a different angle. The rudiments of persuasion. Did you know that if waiters include a gift like a mint or a cookie at the end of their meal, tips on average increase by 14%. That is an example of reciprocity. People feel obligated to give if we have been given something. So that is why when I'm negotiating repairs, I'm going to call and say, hey, though the sellers really feel like that high water pressure isn't an issue. They've lived in the home and enjoyed it for 5 years. They're willing to give that, but they're really concerned about X. So start with the give before we return with a nope, nope, nope. Scarcity, authority. We're more likely to comply with a request if it's coming from a perceived authority or expert in the field. I want to remind us of authority. Rather than just saying, my clients need you to change the swap out the PRV valve because the water pressure is too high, I'm going to state that we're concerned that a home warranty company won't cover this issue if this is not addressed. So I'm using a point of authority. It's not us asking for this. The industry sets that this could be a problem for my clients in the future. Consistency, people tend to gravitate towards and feel more comfortable in situations that are consistent over time. Treating the listing broker like an enemy, once you start with that, they are always the enemy throughout the entire thing. And these are the actual steps in the figures through reciprocity. Liking, everyone likes people who are similar to themselves. And studies have shown that in group preferences is positively correlated with persuasion. So the more positive I can be, the more I can make that other party feel like we have a common goal, we're working together, the better. And then consensus, English, Erin. The kitchen that is pinned over and over again in Pinterest makes other people feel like it is easy, is of more interest. Likewise, if you have a reputation as a great agent to work with, people are more likely to want to work with you. This is consistent, something we have to carry through our different transactions. So don't pick your battle this time. Come from a place of reciprocity, so that if you battled at negotiations for the contract, you're not battling again when it comes to inspections and negotiations or appraisal coming in low. Give and take. Give and take, which leads me right into our next strategy or concept for negotiations, and that's value-based negotiations. Negotiating is all about a give and take. We're reiterating this over and over again. One of the core challenges in negotiating is to identify value-creating moves, things that are cheap for us to give and valuable for you to receive, and vice versa. So the refrigerator, if you know from the beginning that your clients don't want to have to move it, that pool table, hold on to that pool table. Your sellers don't want to move it anyway. And when you're negotiating repairs and the buyers have expressed an interest, lead with, hey, I know your buyers mentioned early on they were going to put a pool table in that space. Why don't I see if I can get my sellers to leave the pool table for you, but in exchange, they're not going to go caulk all of those windows, or whatever that hang up was for your sellers. So think about those value-based negotiations. What can I offer to the other side of the transaction in response for either disagreeing with one term or asking for something in return? And I just mentioned that example as being strategic with your inclusions. A lot of information. We're deep diving here. Anybody have any ads there? Misconceptions. We know Barbara Corcoran, a lot of respect for the woman, but I disagree with her wholeheartedly on one negotiation strategy that she teaches. And you guys have to decide your comfort level on this. She says nothing poisons a deal faster than when asking price is immediately accepted, or when a buyer's first bid is accepted. Either the seller feels he's underpriced the home, and you guys have all had that conversation, or the buyer feels that they've offered too much. How many people, I'm going to ask for a show of hands, have dealt with that? Oh, they took our offer just as it was written. We must have offered too much. We could have gotten a better deal. Or you get 5 offers on day one, and your sellers say, we should have asked more. And there's this feeling. Know how to diminish those fears for your clients. For sellers, you wanted a buyer who really loves your home. Making a strong offer means they see the value of your home and they're willing to pay it. So again, I'm humanizing the other party. They didn't just steal that house from them. They agree with you. They see you took amazing care of this home, and they're willing to pay that price. For buyers, the sellers had a bottom line when they listed the home. The fact that they accepted your first offer means you met their bottom line. This is a positive going into repair negotiations. So that's how I would spin, and those are 2 phrases that I've used 30 times in those situations, because you will consistently get that fear from folks. So I don't think that you need to always try to negotiate and have a give and take. Sometimes that beautiful offer that was just what your sellers wanted should be accepted just as it is, but coach your clients, set that tone. Hey, it doesn't happen often, but you wanted a buyer who really loves your home. These buyers have shown that they really love your home. They've made the offer just the way you wanted to see it. They're willing to pay what you wanted. So I can set that tone so I don't leave that feeling for those folks. And then I add a little note here. If you do your homework, negotiations should be smooth. Back and forth causes stress for everybody involved. You know, every time you send that offer out and we're waiting to hear back, it is stress for everybody involved. You're getting constant texts Have you heard back? Have you heard back? And we're waiting for parties. So the better you can write terms from the beginning, because we've asked the other client, I'm sorry, the other agent, what would be considered favorable, the easier it is for everybody. As much as you can, make anything you're asking for, make the other party feel as if it was their idea. Come on, you do it with your kids, right? Laura, I'm looking at you teacher-wise. You guys do that with your kids. Make them think it was their idea. Smart negotiations often subtly encourage the other party to think they're in control. A great way to do this is to offer them a quick out. Studies have shown that using affirming language such as, you'll probably refuse, but lead to an increase in compliance. Your sellers probably don't want to leave it, but my buyers really would be willing to move the closing date if they had the refrigerator that they don't have to order and worry about getting it into the home. Another strategy for the ego-driven agent, Chris, that agent you were talking about before, you probably won't be able to get your clients comfortable with this, but this is what I'm thinking. People love a challenge. That person who needs to feel the win, you probably won't be able to get your clients to be comfortable with this, but I think we can get to the closing table if you can make this happen. I can't tell you how often that's, well, I bet I can make that happen. Or I doubt I can get my clients to agree with this, but what do you think of? And goes in the other direction. The buyer is asking you to pick up the closing costs in order to close the deal. You're free to say no to that, of course, but would you be willing to consider it? You know, that's a common, you're free to say no. Giving them that out makes people kind of want to achieve it because it feels like a win to them, even though they're giving up a concession. So I love that language. I use that. We probably won't be able to get our clients to agree on that. And sometimes you make it mutual. Even if you have a win-win agent that responds to the win-win, hey, Chris, we might not be able to pull this off, but do you think you could get your seller, if you could get your seller to move the closing date back by a week, I bet I could get the buyer to do paint the fascia on his own. It's a win-win. Only because I'm going to revisit it, and it goes to strategic silence, the power of no. I use this example when we are negotiating a listing agreement and everybody gets squirrely and we are getting to the page where we're going to say the listing begins on this date and it ends on this date. And then I get to commissions and I say, my brokerage charges a 6% listing commission. And they say, Erin, is that negotiable? I just say, no, and I move on. Remember, I don't get paid to list homes. I get paid to sell homes. Strategic silence, when I say no, it's confident, it's assertive. What I don't say is no, because I'm going to advertise your house on over 100 websites and I'm going to put it in Homes and Land magazine and I'm going to create a property specific website. I'm not going through all of that. Strategic silence, and I move on. I do the same thing with an agent who's calling, Erin, they really want the refrigerator. Do you think your sellers are going to offer it? No, but I respect you asking, or I respect them asking. And that's, if no feels too abrupt for you, give that positive, but I respect them asking. If you already know the answer to that, sometimes we have to confirm with our clients if we've not had that conversation. But when negativity is an ongoing attitude, no is actually a moment of clear choice. It announces, however indirectly, something affirming about you. It shows strength, and it doesn't imply I'm saying this just because I'm trying to negotiate. It's just a clear, concise answer and takes something off of the table. So a lot of people feel like no has a negative connotation to it, but no is very comforting to people because it's concise. It removes that point from our negotiation and allows us to focus on those other things that we might be able to bend on. So don't be afraid of that term no. It doesn't happen a lot. We can kind of glaze through this. I know lowball offers are not super prevalent in our market because we're so often dealing with people offering above asking price in competitive offer situations, but I will just plant the seed here and we will revisit this as our market shifts and we get some more inventory. Statistically, lowball offers equal low results. Quite often sellers, and this might happen in negotiating back and forth, even in repairs, statistically where folks think they need to go to an extreme on an offer to leave room for negotiation, that normally doesn't work out that way. So if you look at tons of studies where you say your seller's listed for 400, the buyer offers 350 because they want to land at 375. The odds of landing where they want statistically work against them if they've created such a negative low point. So just be careful with this, and we can dive into that. I don't think it's as pertinent right now. Are we okay with skipping that one? I'm not seeing that as much right now. I have a cash buyer, Allison, wanting to offer, my pop-up, $15,000 below ask on a brand new listing. I've tried explaining this to her, but she says she wants to at least try. Ooh, Allison, that's a tough one. So I'd go back and ask my ground points with my buyer, and I would precisely ask her why she wants to offer $15,000 less. Make her come up with an answer for you. Does she feel the home is worth $15,000 less? Is she uncomfortable with the mortgage payment at the higher? She's actually more comfortable. So again, asking a direct question about why she's making that decision will give you some insight on how to respond and coach her past it. She might respond and say, this isn't exactly my dream home, so I just want to make an offer and see what happens. So that'll help you give some context. So I ask anytime I'm working with a buyer or a seller, I ask them why they want to set that point. And that way I know exactly what I'm dealing with and responding to them. When negotiating repairs, and these are, I'm leaving strategies and definitions of negotiations and just sharing some personal reminders here. When negotiating repairs, consider, again, humanizing these items and giving context. Describe why you've requested or why your buyers have requested these specific repairs. Is it because we want them to be warrantable, so this isn't a problem for us or the sellers in the future? Are your sellers not willing to do repairs and they're offering cash instead? Buyers can take that personally and say, hey, they want us to do all the work. That's not fair. Give context why. Describe that the sellers travel a great deal for work, so they're worried about not being able to keep a close eye on those repairs and make sure they're done the way that they would want them to be done. I can't tell you how often I hear that agents think it's ridiculous that their clients are asking for the sensors at the bottom of a garage door to be double checked because they don't work quite as well. But for a family purchasing a home, that's a big safety risk for clients running under the garage doors. We don't want anybody to get injured. So giving context and describing that it's for the safety of their kids. Another example, I was once negotiating a deal and it felt super nitpicky that the buyer's agents or the buyers were asking for everything on every little electrical item to be addressed, all the way down to the outside covers that were perfect and functional to be replaced with the bubble covers to today's code. I mean, it was the biggest list I've ever seen in electrical repairs, and my sellers were personally offended. It's not our responsibility to take everything up to code. And I called the agent, trying to work through this. They were going to back out. I finally get the agent on the phone, and she shares with me that the buyers had an electrical fire on their previous home, and they are just terrified of electricity. Literally, that one humanizing comment, had she provided that up front, my sellers would have said instantly yes. And that humanizing element, they completely agreed to it. We focused on some other items on the repair and got through the transaction. So anytime you have context as to why your clients are asking for something, give that human element to it. And anytime you can, provide written estimates. We know stresses get high when we're getting a repair list. Sometimes our buyers or sellers have no clue of what that means to them financially. So making this something tangible and understandable for them, you guys know it. We look at an inspection report and it can feel even overwhelming for us as we have experience. So imagine for our clients that are also moving their kids out of schools and packing boxes and all of those things. Try to make this something tangible for them to understand anytime possible. It's a lot of information. I'm squeezing right up to the last minute. What about when the seller is only willing to do the bare minimum repairs and not willing to offer any cash in lieu of? The listed things, that broken windows on seller's disclosure, does that exempt them from repairing? Seller's never required to do repairs. Great question. So a seller's not required to do repairs. They can sell a home as is in that condition. Disclosure is just so that we aren't ever hiding anything and we're providing the buyers with that information. So they're certainly able to do so. You know, technically, and what I'm always trying to remind my buyers of going into negotiations is that we are agreeing, we've made an offer agreeing to purchase this home exactly as is. So the option period gives us the opportunity to do our due diligence, but we may ask for repairs and the sellers say, no, we're at our bottom line now with how this home is today. We're not willing to do any more. So if I set that expectation for the buyers going in and they understand how this contract works, they're more likely to be okay if the seller says, nope, we're not willing to cover some of these things. Versus if I haven't explained that and I ask my buyers to put together this list of 30 items they want repaired or ask them what they want repaired and we send it over and the sellers reject it, they didn't understand those expectations coming in. They're going to feel rejected and frankly might take it personally when that might not be the intention of the seller. So the more I can explain those upcoming steps and set expectations will lead us to be more successful. My seller did not have any money for repairs, so we gave $5,000 off sales price. And there were a lot of strategies. So this is where it comes to us to offer, if we can't offer one thing to appease the buyers, but we have a different tool for being able to find a win-win situation, that's exactly what you guys are describing. You're giving them different tools to be able to find success. Multiple offers, we're not going to deep dive into this. We're wrapping up, but I want to kind of come back and address a few questions here. These are just reminders of different strategies when you're representing the buyers and sellers, because that tends to be conversations that come up. I just mentioned to you that we should always be providing options for our buyers. So when we're coaching our buyer through a contract or negotiations for repairs, we're never just saying, what do you want to do? We're giving them options. So for instance, we're drawing up an offer for a buyer. These are some of the strategies we may use to be most appealing to the sellers. And when we're presenting, and Marissa will go through your question, when we're presenting offers to our clients, we don't just say, here are the offers, what do you want to do? We give them their offers or their options. We have 4 main strategies. A, we can send a specific form, our Texas Association of Realtors form that offers, it goes back to all parties and said your offer would be looked at more favorably if you included the following terms. Or we can accept any one offer as is. We can counter one offer but not multiple, remember. Or of course we can respond back to all offers and ask them to present their highest and best. I believe in today's market, number 4 isn't as valuable because we've set that expectation early on. We understand that so many of our homes are going into multiple offer situations. We hope that agents are encouraging their buyers to come in with their highest and best. Marissa, to come back to your question there, when it comes to presenting 22 offers, it can be super overwhelming. We are required to present all offers to our clients. So I provide all of those offers to my clients, but then I tend to categorize offers into different scenarios or maybe liabilities or things that might not be as appealing for their bottom line, you know, what they were trying to accomplish. So again, I have that conversation, maximizing, are we trying to maximize our return? Are we most concerned about the quick close? And then I would use those things that I asked questions and my sellers told me were their priorities, and that's where I would categorize those offers. And then I would jump them. You know, I might take 10 of those and say, these were all $10,000 below any of the other offers, and I might have some description there of why I feel those aren't the most appealing. I won't drive them through every single offer. Then I would say I've left these in this category and I think that you'll find these have this in common and you might find them appealing. And normally I try to narrow it down to about 3 offers that we go through with a fine-tuned comb that are most appealing for what they've described for me, and then we figure out our approach. Once we've looked at those 3 strongest offers, and I've described the others, presented them, but not gone through every single detail, then I would address those 3 and see which direction they want to go. It's a lot of information. How are we feeling?
I felt that, you know, maybe that would have been the easiest, right? Like categorizing cash, financing, or, you know, like you said, under 10,000, whatever they offered.
Right. My big reminder with negotiations is don't be afraid to ask questions. Think about the way we're asking it. So we talked about that in some of these strategies, but the more questions you ask, the better you understand both your own clients and their motivations. So I know it's this balance where we're trying not to deep dive into our clients' finances too much, and we can only pry so much on forcing them to do certain things when it comes to inspections and repairs that make us a little nervous. But ask those questions as to why it's important. So Allison, why does she want to offer 13,000 or 15,000, whatever that number was, below asking price, so that she has to come up, and then exercise strategic silence. Ask the question and wait for her to come up with a response. If it's I don't know, then you might have to ask a few of those leading questions. And I can stop presenting here. Ask a few of those leading questions. Is it because selling again in 3 years is a great priority or big concern for you? Is it because the difference in the monthly payment? And then we might use what Jim was describing, pull up our app and look at what that actually means, make it something tangible. $13,000 is a lot of money, but what's 13 times 7, Laura? Who are my math teachers? Is that a lot of money to them per month? You're not a math. I know. I know you weren't a math teacher. I just picked on you.
No, I was science, not math. I just want to clarify for everybody.
I love it. So ask those questions. Same thing on the other end. I can't tell you how often I'm negotiating with somebody. You know, Chris and I are on the other end of the deal, and he says, my sellers just won't budge on this item. Ask him why, and then sit and wait for an answer. And I'm picking on you, Scott or Chris. We're going to all be ready to negotiate with you. So ask those leading questions. Ask him why that's important to his sellers. And then that information might be, you know, it might be important to both parties. But once I mentioned that electrical situation in my inspections, once one party understands why it's so important to the other party, it might give them some context, and they might allow them to win in that point and choose another point that's more important to them. All right, lots of information, team. I'm done with training, but any general questions, strategies, shares, what's worked for you, what hasn't?
How do you ask again when you said because